Today, we are breaking down some of the murkiest wide receiver cores around the NFL for dynasty purposes, for best ball and redraft purposes. You got to make decisions on these guys. There's differing price points. There's guys that maybe you'd prefer at cost, and some guys straight up that we might prefer, even though they're cheaper. So we're going to break down some of the muddiest and most difficult to figure out wide receiver cores in the league. And we're going to kick things off, Danny, with the San Francisco 49ers, a wide receiver core that has undergone some changes. No more Deebo Samuel. Ricky Pearsall was drafted last year. Juwan Jennings with a nice breakout, and Brandon Aiyuk coming off of an injury. From a dynasty perspective, it goes Aiyuk, Pearsall, kind of in a cluster there. Wide receiver 37, wide receiver 39 for those two guys respectively. And then Juwan Jennings, wide receiver 53. A little bit later down the board. From a dynasty angle, what are your thoughts on this receiver core? And then we can kind of talk about the redraft side of it.
Yeah, so I'll just mention the ADP in conjunction because it is fascinating that the ADP in redraft versus dynasty is flipped on its head because you're looking at Juwan Jennings. I mean, he's the wide receiver 53 in both formats, 136 overall, like you said, in dynasty, 63 overall in ADP. So it is pretty clear. Pearsall, of course, the median in both scenarios where he's the second most valued dynasty asset. He's the second most valued redraft asset. But we do see Aiyuk and Jennings basically flipping here. And I do think it makes sense. Like, to me, Aiyuk is still the best asset in dynasty. I mean, we saw him literally have a 1,300-yard year, top 5 in PFF grade a couple years ago. Like, we know the talent is there for him to potentially reach that superstar area. The issue with him is that he's already 27 years old. The last time that the market saw him on the field, he wasn't playing at his best. And quite frankly, we've seen all offseason. I mean, he's going out on his personal YouTube page talking about how, I had no trade value and I was recovering all season from my injury. It's like the vibes right now with Aiyuk, especially with Dynasty, makes him somebody that's super polarizing and really hard to gauge because, I mean, what build does he fit? If you're a contender, you're not getting the production from him, at least right away. We'll talk about that in the redraft section. If you're a rebuilder, he's going to be a 27-year-old wide receiver that's coming off a major knee injury.
I think he's one of the few assets that is ideal for a one-year punt because I've talked about, like, I am much higher on Aiyuk from a dynasty perspective than you are. Yeah. And it's because I'm willing to believe, again, whole career sample size, that this guy's just been an excellent receiver most of his career. He was number 2 in yards per team pass attempt with a top 12 wide receiver on the field in PPR points per game, Deebo Samuel. The tight end 6 that year in George Kittle, and a legendary running back in Christian McCaffrey. So I think the dude's just super talented. It's making me annoyed that everything that comes out news-wise about this dude is making him seem less appealing. Seemingly every time we talk about Brandon Aiyuk, it lowers his ADP in some format. Yeah. It's just, for me, I'm like, this guy's just so much better than what people last remember of him.
Well, I mean, I think when he's fully healthy and he's fully right mentally, like, you're talking about a top 8 wide receiver talent in the league. It's just, for me, the issue is, I mean, when does he become Stephon Diggs? When does he become Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, where it's like, you're betting on those guys giving you production, but because they're going to be older assets with some concerns for long-term viability, I just don't really see him re-entering that top 24 frame.
I mean, he's only 27. It's not like he's 29, 30.
But he'll be 28 next offseason. And like, if he doesn't have a productive year this year, it'll be 1.5 years removed from when we actually had him, valued high in a best ball redraft mindset. Like, that's what makes him so polarizing, because I think if you're buying Aiyuk, you're buying him on the fact that you think the production's going to get back to where it was. And you're probably saying, okay, even if his dynasty value doesn't return to dynasty wide receiver 13 or 14 on the market, I'm still gaining that production. That would be the thesis, I would say, if you're buying Aiyuk at this price.
Yeah, if you're buying him, you're hoping by the end of the season he looks like himself. And then going into next offseason, he kind of maybe bounced back. Like, let's say right now we're actually on the board in our Devi startup, and he hasn't gone yet, and it's the 8-10 right now. Yeah. And I mean, you probably know this by looking at my rankings. If he goes 8-11, it'll be because I selected him there, and I'm okay kind of stomaching a little bit of a value loss maybe early in the season. He hits the pup list, whatever the case is, and then thinking I can recuperate that value going into next offseason, because if he's 2 years post ACL, 28 years old, going into next offseason, where does he go in redraft, assuming he looked better at the end of the season? My thought process is that he might be like a 3rd round redraft pick at that point in time. And here's the other thing with Aiyuk too. There has been rumblings that he wants to get dealt. The 49ers are shopping him. He could just, you said, when does he turn into Stephon Diggs? Maybe he'll turn into Stephon Diggs when he gets dealt like Stephon Diggs changed teams at the end of his career or towards the middle part of his career when he went to Buffalo. And if he goes to the Commanders next offseason, or if he goes to a different team next offseason, we might have a completely different projection in mind for aiyuk, the player. So he's very polarizing in Dynasty and in redraft, because in redraft, you got him wide receiver 46. In Best Ball Mania, maybe you're just hoping that backloaded week 17 upside is there for you. But you have to be worried about he might be a zero for the first 4 to 6 games of the year from a redraft perspective.
We're thinking about the rosy landing spots only for him to get dealt to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely possible. I don't know. I don't know what to do with aiyuk right now. All I know is when there's this much uncertainty and it's presenting a discount to the tune of the 8-10 right now on the board of where he's at in our startup, to me, all he really has to do is look like himself towards the back end of the season, and he's back to being a 5th round startup pick.
I just don't see, like, 5th rounds where we're taking Devontae Smith, where we're realistically getting a 24, 25-year-old version of what we're expecting from aiyuk.
Well, Devontae Smith is half a year younger than Brandon Aiyuk, so that's not
really.
Sorry,
25, 26. My apologies.
He's 26. He's my age.
26.
He's not that much. Like, I think one thing I've noticed about you is that you seem to think that Aiyuk is way older than he is.
No, I knew he was a 98. I genuinely thought Devontae Smith was a 99. But regardless, I mean, insert wide receiver in that range. Chris Olave, Zay Flowers, Jerry Jeudy's younger than him. Chris Godwin, obviously older, but I would say that when they're both healthy at this point, like Godwin was the wide receiver 2 in points per game. Like, I think if you want to value Godwin higher, also I'm on my best ball rankings. Let me go to my dynasty to give you guys a better look there. Zay Flowers, Josh Downs, Chris Olave, Jordan Addison, George Pickens.
I think he'll be ahead of way all he'll be smoking those guys in startup ADP next year if he's back to himself. I just think he's frankly just much better than those guys.
I think it's more likely that you're looking maybe he gets back to where Jalen Waddle currently is.
That's just that's such hindsight bias in my opinion.
Why though?
Last offseason, we were taking him as a top 12 dynasty receiver.
Dude, I love aiyuk, but also you have to acknowledge that older wide receivers, when they have a bad year and they're coming off a major knee injury, like, it's hard for me to envision him recapturing that value. Like, he's a risky asset.
I'm speaking in the world in which he looks like himself back end of the season next year. Because if he plays like himself back end of the season, let's say me and you are doing the classic thing, week 11 onward, Brandon Aiyuk was actually like a 16 point per game producer or something like that. He'll be right wherever AJ Brown is in ADP. Maybe
I disagree.
A little bit lower than that. Maybe he's wide receiver 24 or something in startup ADP. He'll be a top 5 round pick. That's what I choose to believe on Brandon Aiyuk. But I understand there will be fluctuations with his value this calendar year.
I agree as a whole that he's a buy because the market's so down on him. I just disagree with your aspect of it that he'll gain market value. It's more so for me, he's just going to be able to give you production at less than cost.
Okay.
I don't think he's ever going to regain.
We can agree to disagree on that. I'll keep quoting what Harmon said in his reception perception this time last offseason, which is that he's the best, like he might be the best receiver, the best separator in the league, is what Harmon was saying about him.
Dude, I think he's a top 8 wide receiver talent, but you also have to bake in what the market's kind of thinking of him right now.
Yeah, and I'm baking that in. I just think it's really baked into his price. When we're almost in the 9th round and you can get this dude, I think that's very baked into his cost at this point. But anyways, let's talk about the other receivers in this core right now, because as you made reference to, Pearsall's in the middle of the road, wide receiver 39, wide receiver 41, respectively, in both formats. I think a lot of people are expecting Pearsall to really be a huge beneficiary of aiyuk maybe missing the first couple games of the season. Pearsall, of course, had the offseason shooting incident where people are willing to throw out his rookie season. I'm not quite willing to throw out his rookie season as, first round receiver. We throw out his rookie season like a lot of people did for Jameson Williams, for example, because he was coming off the ACL tear. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Pearsall in terms of the two formats? Which one are you more likely to click the button on Ricky Pearsall? Dynasty at wide receiver 39, 99th overall ADP, or redraft at wide receiver 41, 74th overall ADP?
So I actually think he's a fine click in both. I think specifically in regards to Jennings versus Pearsall, like, it makes sense. I would rather have Pearsall in Dynasty. Obviously, when you're just talking about the bet, 2nd year versus 6th year wide receiver, 1st round investment versus 7th round investment. Just historically speaking, Pearsall is the bet to make if you're just talking strictly between him and Jennings. But it gets a little bit more interesting from a redraft best ball lens, because obviously last year, like, I'm not going to take it away, Jennings, like, you look at the EPA, you look at the efficiency, you look at what he was actually doing on his targets, like, he had a really freaking good season. The issue to me is the decision boils down to if you're bought in on this year 5 breakup from Jennings last year versus the flashes that Pearsall showed in a year that he got shot. Realistically, if you think Pearsall is going to be, first round investment, showed flashes down the stretch, you should be a little bit less high on what you think of Jauan Jennings. If you're more so, hey, you know, Pearsall was overdrafted based off his prospect profile. We get a guy that's already broken out in Jennings. That's what the pro Jennings people will say. I will lean Pearsall at the end of the day, but realistically, I think all three of these wide receivers are risk. And the way I'm playing the 49ers passing game is through Kittle and McCaffrey.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm the rare person who seems to be playing it through aiyuk as the, like, in Dynasty at least. In redraft, I'm not gonna overexpose myself to Brandon Aiyuk, but from a Dynasty perspective, I'm definitely gonna be leaning on the side of, yeah, I think once Aiyuk is back, he's gonna be the starting and best receiver on this team. Jauan Jennings was terrible for 5 years in his career up until last year, and he had one monster game against the Rams that really inflated those numbers. He was kind of a replacement level wide receiver 3 after that. And then Pearsall was quite literally the worst prospect to ever be selected in the first round, according to the FSC prospect model. So as much as people could say we should throw out the rookie season because of what happened to him, I mean, it's not like this was Malik Neighbors as a prospect. Like, he was nowhere near worthy of going in the first round. And then he also had a down rookie season where, yeah, he had a couple spike weeks and you can excuse it because of what happened. But it's not like when you combine bad prospect with the rookie year that Ricky Pearsall had, like, if he hits, he's going to be a pretty major outlier. And I get that's the 49ers and they're efficient and all this kind of stuff. It's just challenging for me to get there on either guy, Pearsall or Jennings. I'm really not that excited about both of them from either lens, Dynasty or redraft. I'm going to play it, like you just said, through George Kittle, through Christian McCaffrey and redraft. And then in Dynasty, I'm okay waiting until, or not waiting, I guess, but I'm okay taking the plunge on aiyuk in certain builds.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't mind, you know, getting a couple pieces of exposure because obviously if they do hit this offensive situation, the insulation of the 49ers scheme, the insulation of obviously having Brock Purdy, an explosive top 10 level offense when everybody's fully healthy. Like, I think that is appealing. So I don't want to be completely out on these guys in Dynasty. However, when I'm talking like 2 to 3% across my portfolio, that's about where I'd be. I don't want to wrinkle in a couple of shares, but I don't want to be overinvested.
I think I have Jennings in one league and Pearsall in one league, and that's just fine for me. I'm okay missing out. Specifically, Pearsall is the one that could really burn you because if he has a monster year, he'll probably gain a shit ton of value. I'm not really there with Pearsall, the prospect. I'm okay having 1 or 2 shares here and there and maybe being at 5% range in terms of redraft ADP. I'm not quite there with Pearsall.
And it's funny when you compare and contrast, obviously, the 49ers situation, 49ers proven offense, explosive, attached to Shanahan, but all these wide receivers are kind of murky in one way or another in terms of just the negative kind of sentiment on them right now. The Bears are the complete inverse, where they're unproven, but we're excited about Ben Johnson. We're excited about Caleb Williams. And realistically, I think all three of these wide receivers are just really good players.
Yeah, and this is another one where we're going to disagree a lot on who we like and who we don't like and stuff. Because here's the thing. Naturally, you're going to be higher on all of these guys. Because you have Caleb Williams probably, I would venture a guess to say, at least 12 to 15 spots higher in your startup rankings than I do. He's my 21st overall player. He's probably like your 8th to 10th overall player, I would guess.
Let me see exactly where I have him at. Superflex rankings, I go up to 11th overall is where I have him.
11th. Okay, so we're going to disagree just in terms of what we think of Caleb Williams. I'm thinking, okay, my new ceiling for Caleb Williams is he turns into Kyler Murray. I don't think he has Patrick Mahomes upside based on what I saw from his rookie season.
Yeah, I mean, I just disagree with that. I think we kind of have to throw out this rookie season, Shane Waldron, Roma Dude, like the entire offense.
We also said this about Trevor Lawrence, and if you adjusted and honed your expectations based on what you saw from Trevor Lawrence's rookie season, you're like, okay, maybe it's not or maybe it's not Justin Herbert's ceiling anymore. Maybe it's more of a, you know, he's going to be a Jordan Love type ceiling type of player or something. I think that's what I'm doing for Caleb Williams. That's the strategy that I'm employing.
Counterpoint, after that playoff comeback, we're looking at a mid-first round startup pick.
Of course. Yeah. No, of course. I think Caleb definitely could take a huge step forward this year, and I could absolutely eat my words. I want to bake in the rookie season more than some people are. And obviously you are willing to throw it out.
I'm willing to throw it out again. Like the archaic nature, obviously the offensive line not playing well, Shane Waldron completely inhibiting this offense. We literally have Matt Harmon saying in the write-up for Roma Dunze that this offense was completely chaotic. So I'm willing to throw out a lot of this from a player's perspective because there was no structure. And it's hard for a rookie quarterback to develop right away when there is no structure in your offense. Guess what? With Ben Johnson coming in, structure in the offense is not something we should be worried about going forward. On top of that, I mean, Ben Johnson, I mean, I've made the case for Caleb before. I'm not going to go too in depth here, but Ben Johnson literally accepting the job for Caleb Williams. I'm very high on Caleb Williams. I'm very high on Ben Johnson as a whole. And I honestly just think, like I said, all three of these wide receivers are just very talented players. Dynasty for me, it is pretty straightforward though. Like I'm just going to draft the younger wide receivers here. I'm at or above market on both Rome Odunze and Luther Burden. Again, two wide receivers that were top three prospects for me in their respective draft years. I'm going to be in on this offense. And we specifically have this discussion for receivers, but I mean, you can even group Loveland into here. Realistically, this quartet of pass catchers, I mean, they're not lacking talent. Let's just say that.
Yeah. No, I'm actually, in terms of Dynasty, where they are at wide receiver, 19 for Odunze, 26 for DJ Moore, 36 for Luther Burden. I am a few spots lower on Odunze. I have him at 23. DJ Moore, I'm the lowest on, I believe, of the group because, like you said, he is the older of the wide receivers and that kind of thing. He's at 26. I have him at 38. And then Burden, I'm right about where he is. I have him at 37. He goes 36. So Burden, I guess, is the one guy that I'm most in on of this group. And all of their prices are just kind of located in a range where I would rather take someone else. That's the only way I can describe the Bears from a dynasty angle, because like I said, I believe that both things are true, that Caleb was bad and the scheme was bad, not just that Caleb was bad because the scheme was bad.
Yeah, in terms of where I have them ranked, 19 for Rome Odunze, so literally exactly at market. I'm curious. So market has him 56 overall ADP. I just want to see where he is in my overall rankings. Rome Odunze would be 57 overall with 6 rookies ahead, so he'd be 51 for me. So I'm basically right aligned with where the market has Rome Odunze. We'll talk about DJ Moore in a second, both from a redraft perspective and a dynasty perspective, but we are both lower on DJ Moore than what the market currently is. And Luther Burden, wide receiver 36 on the ADP, like you said. I have him aggressive. He was a top 3 wide receiver for me. I love the landing spot. I think the skill set matches extremely well with what Ben Johnson wants to do. He's my wide receiver 23, and he's a guy that I have probably 85% exposure across my portfolio.
Yeah. I'm definitely not there on Burden. I've drafted him a couple times because I'm right about at market. DJ Moore in specific rooms can slide. I would say wide receiver 26 is a little bit steep in terms of the rooms that you and I play in. I would say he's probably closer to like where I have him ranked at like 38. In some rooms, like we saw him go off the board a lot later than I think
late 7th,
72
right?
Overall ADP. He was like the mid 8th round pick or something in the draft that we're in right now.
Yeah, let me see. So he went off the board actually at the 8-7. So I mean, what would that be? 80.
That's definitely not 72 overall ADP. That
91st, I believe.
Yeah, like that's a lot more in line with where I have him ranked. Like I have DJ Moore ranked at 106 with about 10 to 12 rookie picks ahead of him, probably 12 rookie picks ahead of him. So I'm right about where he went.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm definitely behind in my dynasty rankings right now. I have him more so in the mid to late 30s, just because when I'm looking at it, like I would prefer Waddle. Actually, sorry, I have him at 34. Correction. I would prefer Waddle over him. I would prefer, Jameson Williams, DK Metcalf, Jerry Jeudy, Josh Downs, etc. above him. So for me, 34 is about where he finds himself nested there. Specifically, though, we can go to the best ball market, redraft market. The redraft market is pretty clear. The redraft market is treating DJ Moore as the wide receiver 1. Rome Odunze is the wide receiver 2, and Luther Burden is the wide receiver 3. To me, this is a way more ambiguous core than the market currently makes it seem.
Yeah. If you believe that genuinely, like any one of these guys could be the number 1 receiver, you're probably going to have a lot of Luther Burden as a result because he's the cheapest, right? He's wide receiver 57, 114th overall ADP is also after that range where you're not really getting a lot of wide receivers anymore, where like you're deciding between kind of bums at that point. Whereas Odunze, I like his price. I think it's fair. I just can't really draft him over Olave and Godwin and some of the better projections. So I don't end up with him a whole lot. It's not that I don't like Rome Odunze, the projection this year. And I think of all of the guys in this receiver core, the Matt Harmon, look how bad this offense was. Look at how stupid this scheme was. Odunze is the one that gets the most of a pass for me, like including Caleb Williams, including the running backs, including DJ Moore, because Odunze was a rookie also on top of all that chaos going on. And he was a top 10 pick. It's the highest team investment of anybody there. So Odunze, I want to get more shares of. I want to be maybe about at market, I would say, on Rome. DJ Moore, I'm not extremely sold on.
The vibes are just so weird with him. Like straight up, right now you got Moore himself saying, "I'm not going to get as many touches this year as years past." Then you got Ben Johnson literally critiquing his body language and saying, "Hey, like I want guys that are professionals with or without the ball in their hands." Like to me, everything adding up, like, why is the market still taking him as wide receiver? They're drafting him as a wide receiver 2 right now when Moore himself fell off dramatically last year. And obviously, again, Shane Waldron, I don't think the scheme as a whole is really indicative of the talent that Moore is. But we also have to contextualize that last year he had more targets than he did in 2023 and produced 400 less receiving yards.
Yeah. And the actual result of this from both a dynasty and a redraft angle is that the one role in this offense that I feel confident, or the two roles, I guess, in this offense that I feel confident about is the starting tight end and the starting running back. And that's how I've been playing this to get exposure to this offense, because I do not want to be out on this offense. Let me be perfectly clear about that, because I do think it can really burn me to be out on this offense. But I think it's way more likely that if this offense is great, that Colston Loveland will be great and DeAndre Swift will return value on ADP. Whereas this offense could be great and these three guys could ping pong weeks all day long.
Yeah, and I would say I would want a little bit more of a discount than where the best ball market has in your redraft leagues. Like, straight up volatility, like you're willing to embrace it more in best ball because you don't have to make those lineup decisions. Because this is such an ambiguous core, I do think there will be weekly spikes, but there'll also be weekly dulls. Like DJ Moore one week might have 23 points because he scored 2 touchdowns, and the next week he gets 2 targets. I really think that could be the nature of this offense, which is why I'm preferring going the cheaper ADP cost in best ball. And in, like I said, redraft leagues, I'm assuming all 3 of these guys are going to be cheaper.
Yeah, and they definitely are. Kind of is a little bit similar to what we saw with the Texans last year, where all of them were kind of inflated partially due to stacking correlation and all that kind of stuff. But Odunze being the 61st overall pick on Underdog and the 76th overall pick on Sleeper, I'm definitely way more in on Odunze at that cost, for example. And DJ Moore is about the same price on both platforms, so I'm probably not going to be drafting a whole lot of him. It's actually even more certain on the redraft market that DJ Moore is the number one, which is where I'm going to get my Odunze and my Burden exposure, is that it's clear that the market thinks that they're 2 and 3.
Yeah, I am very curious. What's Burden's current ADP in the redraft market?
Luther's ADP is, let me take a look. Higgins
134.8.
134. Yeah, that's where we're going to be taking our exposure there. And then even Loveland, like he goes 112, which is like really, really low, especially considering we just saw a rookie tight end kind of break fantasy football last year. So I'm gonna play this, like I said, probably through DeAndre Swift and Colston Loveland for the most part, and in most formats. But Odunze is the one guy that I do want to get my shares to, because I was lower on Burden the prospect, so I'll mix in my shares redraft wise because that's just so cheap. DJ Moore, I'm pretty much out on in all formats. Caleb Williams, I'm a little bit wary of in all formats as well. But Odunze, I want to get more exposure of. Loveland, I'm going to be absolutely packing the bags on, and DeAndre Swift, I also like at cost right now as well. So that's kind of how I'm playing this whole team in general. But the receiver core specifically, I guess Odunze is the one that I want to get more exposed to.
Yeah, for me, Odunze, Burden, Loveland, like I want all 3 of those guys on my teams. Now, obviously, maybe not all 3 of them on the same team, but across my portfolio, 16 dynasty teams, I want a heavy exposure set for all.
If you were in one league, like maybe somebody out there's in one redraft
at their current opportunity costs.
Yeah.
Burden.
Burden's the one guy that you would get exposed to if you were in one league. I would say the one guy that I would want in one league again is probably Loveland. I would say.
You're talking about in redraft or dynasty?
Let's say both. One dynasty home league you're in, one redraft home league you're in.
Burden because he's cheaper than Loveland in dynasty. Loveland because he's cheaper than Burden in redraft.
Well, I mean, he's technically still more expensive in redraft, but they go about in the same range.
So I'm just thinking the Underdog ADP because he goes like 20 or 30 picks after where Burden goes in Underdog.
Right. Yeah. In actually in home leagues, he goes a little bit higher. But yeah, I would say Loveland is probably my answer to both of those questions, to be honest, and maybe Swift in sharper redraft leagues.
Go blue.
Okay. Let's move into Buffalo Bills, because those first 2 receiver cores, I would say, are going to be very consequential decisions. Like, you get the 49ers receivers right, you're probably going to profit quite a bit. You get the Bears receivers right, you're probably going to profit quite a bit. I think the Bills would be less of a hit, but I do think it's worth discussing because they have Josh Allen as their quarterback, who was the MVP of the league. Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, and then like Josh Palmer, Elijah Moore, Curtis Samuel. Those guys are all like late rounders.
Is this the worst receiver core in the league?
It's definitely close to it. I mean, Khalil Shakir is the first one off the board in both formats. Wide receiver 46, 111th overall ADP in Dynasty. Wide receiver 44, 79th overall ADP in Redraft. Here's my thought on Khalil Shakir, because I actually am like a pro Khalil Shakir guy generally. I liked Khalil Shakir when he was
a 12th round pick.
Round dart throw. I don't like Khalil Shakir when you have to pay for what he did last year, which was 100 targets and 800 yards and 4 touchdowns. It's not like you were getting a massive boom performance out of Khalil Shakir.
Dude, I'm glad you said it. It's like realistically, the upside is capped for Shakir. I don't think he is a run your offense level slot. He's not an Amon-Ra. He's not a Rasheed Rice. He's not even a Josh Downs. I don't think he's that type of talent. I do think he's a good slot receiver. I do think he's a functional weapon in the passing game. But do I think he's going to be a guy that can suddenly jump from 100 to 140 plus targets? No, I do not. But do I think Keon Coleman's going to command 140 targets? No, I do not. Do I think Josh Palmer and Elijah Moore are going to command 140 targets? No, I do not. Do I think Dalton Kincaid's going to command 140 targets? No, I do not. Realistically, the sentiment you should get from this point so far, Josh Allen's a fucking superhuman.
Yeah, he's a beast, man. And let me ask you the difference between Christian Kirk and Khalil Shakir this year. Because Christian Kirk goes 140th overall in redraft,
Jalen
and Khalil
Noel?
Shakir goes 82nd overall.
Like Jalen Noel, maybe?
I guess,
no
but like,
Noel
I mean, I would argue that Elijah Moore is just as talented as Jalen Noel is.
Well, I mean, opportunity cost wise, I agree with you because like Kirk's also like a good amount cheaper, but you're drafting Shakir. You're not. People are drafting Shakir 79 overall in redraft because they're like, somebody got to catch passes from Josh Allen.
Yeah. And for me, like, I don't want to pay up for a wide receiver 3 like that, like who is probably like, unless you think he's going to get dramatically better as a player, like you kind of made reference to, and be 130 target receiver this year. And it's possible he's progressed every year of his career and that kind of thing. I think that Josh Allen throws to who's open and progressively is just going to spread the ball out. And Keon Coleman's the other guy that's like the expensive one here. Wide receiver 47, 117th overall ADP in Dynasty. Of course, he's only 21 years old right now. Keon Coleman, also wide receiver 53, 102nd overall ADP in Dynasty. Now, Coleman,
he's interesting.
He's interesting, but also I think he might be a more fun human than a good player. Like, don't you feel that way about Keon, where you're like, oh my God, great interviews, but like, I mean, maybe not that good at football.
Yo, he's a dog. Did you see the way he was talking? Like, he's someone that I would want to chop it up with.
Yeah, like I look at his like games where he's getting full route participation stuff, and like he had like 2 games last year of more than like 5 targets. Like, it's not like you're not getting. I don't think that he's ever going to be like I think the ceiling for an archetype of player like this is Courtland Sutton. Right? Like, that's what you would hope he would turn into. If you drop Courtland Sutton current day on the Buffalo Bills, we'd all be drafting him in like the 2nd or the 3rd round, probably, I would imagine.
You know what the issue is, though?
What?
He was actually bad at the catch point as a rookie.
Yeah.
What happened? Like, that was his clear best
I think
trait.
he'll get better at that. That's probably a player mistake, but...
And I hope so, but like, he has to be better at that. If he is not a ball winner that can win with minimal separation, 3rd percentile against man and 8th percentile against press is not going to cut it as an X.
Yeah, no, I think you're hoping George Pickens, Courtland Sutton is what he turns into. And it's hard to buy that he'll do that at this point in time.
The talent is there.
I don't want to pay up for it unless it's home league ADPs of like, 140 is like my 13th round pick. I'll take a dart throw at that point.
Yeah, like if you're getting super cheap home league, 140 ADP, take the plunge there, because like I do think like if he does work, like I don't think he's lacking talent. That's basically what I'm trying to point out. I do think he needs a like seasoned development at this point, because I mean, obviously 3rd percentile versus 3rd percentile, 8th percentile, struggling against catch point. Like, he was not a functional starting caliber wide receiver as a rookie, but maybe part of that was the injury. Maybe part of that was a Russian process because they trade a 2nd round pick or 3rd round pick for Amari Cooper and he's fucking ass. Like, who knows? Like,
Cooper could still sign there, by the way.
Yeah, he could.
And like really make these guys worse picks. Like, because if Cooper signs there, then suddenly the routes are going to get even minimalized for everybody else involved. Like, I do not think it's out of the range of outcomes that Keenan Allen or Amari Cooper sign here.
You know what? I mean, could you imagine Keenan Allen and Shakir? Like, why are you just running a slot receiver?
Elijah Moore and Samuel also on the roster.
Man, the Bills need a better number 1 receiver. Like,
go trade for aiyuk next offseason, man.
Dude, like, realistically, obviously, I'm biased and I'm happy it ended up the way it is. What the fuck stopped them from trading for George Pickens
or Metcalf?
Right? Like, dude, could you imagine one of those 2 guys on the Bills in the Coleman role?
Yeah, no, it would be great, man. Like, the fact that Josh Allen won MVP last year, these are actual statistics. Quarterback 2 in points per game, 1 MVP. The Bills were 26th in pass attempts also. So it's not like Josh Allen was throwing a ton to get there. Only one wide receiver had more than 75 targets, and it was Shakir at 100. One wide receiver had more than 600 yards, and it was Shakir at 821. One receiver had more than 5 touchdowns, and it was Mac Hollins with 5 touchdowns exactly. So like I said, I think that the way to play this is just take Josh Allen and James Cook.
I gotta ask you this, and even James Cook, like he's the biggest fucking negative regression candidate. Like, really, just draft Josh Allen and you'll be fine. But I mean, it goes back to it. Obviously, from a real life perspective, argument perspective, obviously there's gonna be probably old heads commenting on the video, like, how can you say that? But man, I understand he has to win more in his career. But you tell me right now, why can't Josh Allen be a top 5 to 10 quarterback of all time?
Yeah, he's a beast, man. He's an absolute beast. How have you been playing this in your draft? Because this is my like exposures right now. I have drafted Coleman 0 times. 0. I have 4.5% Shakir, and the only reason I ever draft him is because I'm like, holy crap, I'm falling behind at wide receiver, and I need somebody who's going to get routes and a roll and get targets. That's the only time I ever draft him. The one I've played it through the most has been Elijah Moore, who's an 18th round scroll the F down pick. So it cost me nothing really. And I think honestly playing it cheap with Josh Allen is a good strategy in general. And I have drafted a little bit of Dalton Kincaid only because Dalton Kincaid, before his injury against Indianapolis, was quietly producing like decent receiving grade numbers, yards per route run numbers. He was second on the team in total targets despite missing a couple of games with 75. Do I think Dalton Kincaid's objectively like a good football player at this point in time? No, but he is only a third-year tight end. He was a first-round pick, and it's not like he's been awful. And he has been earning targets. So specifically in tight end premium dynasty leagues, in leagues where you get, he can be kind of like almost what Khalil Shakir is, where he's like a PPR scam to some degree. We just need to see him maintain that route share. The one thing I looked into Dalton Kincaid quite a bit for this because I'm like, is Dalton Kincaid good? Because if Dalton Kincaid was good, he could crush because nobody in this receiving core is going to get a whole lot of targets in general. If Dalton Kincaid were to take a third-year leap this year, it would result in a big, big time return on investment for people drafting Dalton Kincaid. The question is, are we worried about Dawson Knox taking away routes? Are we worried about Dalton Kincaid? All this kind of stuff. My thought is I feel a little bit better about Dalton Kincaid after looking into some of the numbers, seeing what he was doing before the injury. That route participation that really tapered off down the stretch was because of the injury, in my opinion, based on what I've seen.
So 34 of my teams have completed that I can see right now. Just literally searched up Buffalo. And funny, I actually haven't been clicking Josh Allen a ton specifically because when I'm on that back end third, I feel the need that I have to draft a lot of running back and wide receiver projections there. For me personally, again, I've talked to you about this, but realistically in the first 7 or 8 rounds, I only allow myself to grab one onesie. And typically it's been Kittle or typically it's been, a quarterback that maybe falls back a little bit. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I will end up at least at market on Josh Allen by the end of this summer. Regardless, if I have to take 15% in August to get there, I will, because he's that type of player. In terms of the other Bills, though, that I have drafted in these 34, 11.8% Ray Davis is actually how I've been playing the team as a whole. James Cook, obviously the contract stuff, regression candidate. Ray Davis, efficient as a rookie. I just think his price right now is a high value handcuff, 13th round. I feel like he's a very easy click there. In terms of the receivers, though, specifically, because obviously that's what we're talking about right now. I've clicked Keon Coleman's name 1 time. And I've clicked Josh Palmer's name 2 times. Just because if Coleman hits, Palmer's probably irrelevant. If Coleman doesn't hit, maybe Palmer catches a couple spike weeks.
So you have not collected Shakir or Dalton Kincaid or Elijah Moore then?
Nope.
Yeah. I get it. I honestly get it. I don't want to draft any of these guys. I think it's probably smart to make a stance of some kind. And to me, that stance is I'm going to take Kincaid and Moore because they're cheap.
Yeah.
And Palmer as well, because Palmer's cheap. But I think Palmer kind of stinks, to be honest. And I think him and Coleman kind of cannibalize each other.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree on Palmer potentially stinking, but I mean, he's had a couple spike weeks. Obviously, a few years ago when he was fully healthy, like 750 yards. Like if he catches, 2 touchdowns in week 15 for a 15th round pick, that's all you need.
Yeah, I think people might think you have to make a stance because somebody's going to have 1,000 yards here. I would be shocked if somebody had more than 800 yards in this receiving core. Like, to be honest, I think it's going to be a complete committee. The only guy that I could really see getting there is Kincaid if he takes a huge step forward.
Like, realistically, what's stopping them from having 4 or 5 guys between 400 and 800 receiving yards?
Yeah, it's probably going to happen. Like Curtis Samuel have 400 yards. Elijah Moore's got 575.
James
Palmer's
Cook maybe gets more receiving work.
for Josh Palmer. Khalil Shakir has 850 again, and Keon Coleman's got 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. And like, that's maybe the best pick on the board or whatever. Like, not a great situation. Let's talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because there's a lot more receiving fantasy production that is in this receiving core, because unlike Buffalo, they have
all these guys
really good receivers, and it would actually be kind of nice if one of them went to Buffalo, because I mean, not for me, but for fantasy purposes, it would make things a lot easier. Dynasty angle, you got Emeka Egbuka going off the board first, wide receiver 27. Obviously, Godwin and Evans are older. Wide receiver 34 for Evans, wide receiver 45 for Godwin. And all of these guys really fit different builds. Jalen McMillan, wide receiver 55. I would say he's like a full status rebuild type of guy, because in the short term, we just have no idea when he's going to get on the field. But he looked good, and maybe he's a good player. And Godwin coming off an injury, Mike Evans a risk for hamstring stuff. How are you handling this wide receiver core? Let's start from the dynasty angle, and then we'll go into redraft.
So you kind of alluded to it. I like McMillan, the prospect. However, I do feel like at wide receiver 55, you could probably cash in for either more production or just for straight up for a pick equity spot. Like, realistically, can you get a second round pick for McMillan and a third? Because I would rather just take the upside at that point from strictly a dynasty lens. From a redraft lens, I'm actually in on all 4 of these guys at their cost, especially from a best ball angle, because I mean, Mike Evans, obviously Spike Week King, wide receiver 20. Obviously, when all these receivers are healthy, he does take a little bit of a hit, but we know the touchdown equity is going to be there. And we've seen it week 15, week 16 in the past, where he's the piece you need to get to the BBM final. Chris Godwin, obviously wide receiver 2 in points per game. Ankle injury is a concern. You have to be leaving one of your drafts with either Chris Godwin or Emeka Egbuka is where I look at it, because either Chris Godwin is healthy and he crushes his ADP, or Chris Godwin is not healthy and Emeka Egbuka is a league winner.
Yeah, no, I really do think that so I've no surprise to anybody as a Buccaneers fan, but I have 20.5% Mike Evans in best ball. I have 25% Chris Godwin. Both of them I have together on my lone $500 big dog team. And then 14% Emeka Egbuka, 9% J-Max. So I'm drafting all of these guys above market, like you said. The one idiosyncrasy in this ADP set is that in Dynasty, Mike Evans goes ahead of Chris Godwin, even though Chris Godwin is 2.5 years younger than Mike Evans, which to me seems a little weird. I don't know about you. I get that Chris Godwin.
It's the redraft ADP.
I know. I get that he's coming off of an injury and he has higher redraft ADP, but a 3 to 4 year projection in Chris Godwin, who just signed an extension, who's going to be around long. I promise you, Mike Evans could be done after this year. Like, legitimately, he might retire after this season.
I agree with you. I do have Godwin higher as well. I have Godwin wide receiver 37. I do have Mike Evans lower in my dynasty rankings, specifically because, I mean, I listened to you and you've said multiple times, like, yo, Mike Evans may very well retire after this year, which, I mean, I guess that also leans more credence to if you invest in McMillan now and Mike Evans does retire. I mean, the one thing I would ask is, like, you could make the argument at that point that all 3 of your receivers are best utilized in the slot.
But that's a good thing, because this is like a Rams scheme. And at one point in time, you could have said that Kupp and Woods and all those guys were all the same receiver. So it's actually a good thing that Egbuka, McMillan, and Godwin are all very similar. So some people might be like, oh, they don't have anybody to stretch the field. They'd probably draft like a wind sprint king in the 4th round or something if they had to.
Yeah, so I think we pretty much talked about it. I mean, Egbuka, either form. I'll talk about my redraft percentage in terms of my ownership in a second, because I have a boatload of Egbuka, but wide receiver 27 in Dynasty, like, I have him inside my top 20 overall pick. Everything we've heard from camp is that he's been absolutely phenomenal. Like, they've
literally, since they put the pick in, have not stopped gloating about how good they think Emeka Egbuka is. And I don't want to miss on him. I can't say I disagree, because he was a wide receiver 1 upside prospect in the model, despite the competition for targets he had in college. He sounds like the most mature rookie I've ever listened to speak in my entire life. And it is a lot like the guy he might be replacing in Chris Godwin. Like, he's a lot of Chris Godwin qualities to him. And everybody, including Mike and Chris themselves, have said he's a lot like Chris Godwin.
I mean, even Baker Mayfield went out of his way to say, hey, like, listen, like, whichever receiver spot we need to play this guy at, I have no fucking problem and no issue projecting him to be able to do it. And he basically said, like, every single receiver spot we've been asking him to do, he's been phenomenal at. So realistically, like, if you're getting that type of talent, top 20 capital, insulated on a high volume offense, good quarterback, great scheme, like, I mean, both angles, like I said, wide receiver 27, I think, is too low. Wide receiver 50 in redraft, and I'll talk about this right now. 23.5% of my teams is what Emeka Egbuka is on. Admittedly, I wasn't drafting much Evans and Godwin early because of the injury news, but now that I'm hearing a little bit more in terms of it, and Godwin's ADP specifically has fallen a little bit, I've been taking more Godwin, but I've been playing this a lot through Egbuka and through Rachaad White in general.
Yeah, and in redraft leagues, Emeka Egbuka goes at 115 overall, and he will be on every single team of mine. If he's a 10th round pick like that, like I will draft him on every single team because it is reminiscent of, when we were able to get Jefferson as a rookie, Wilson as a rookie. Those guys, when they were rookies, they were going like 9th, 10th round in redraft because of some ambiguity with like the target share and that kind of stuff. And
the best comp is Lamb.
Yeah, Lamb's a good comp to it as well. I mean, JSN as a rookie, Odunze as a rookie. Again, I know necessarily they didn't all smash, but at the same time, Godwin could be coming into the season banged up. Mike Evans is a hamstring pull away from missing a couple of games, as we know. Like this is a really good situation. I honestly think too that this is absolutely a syrup situation, like draft Baker Mayfield. Like he's got so much. He was thrown to Ryan Miller and Cade Otton for like 5 games last year and still posting top 5 numbers.
Yeah, I mean, and the better comparable too, like I mentioned with Lamb, like Lamb had 900 yards as a rookie with Andy Dalton starting the majority of the year because Dak broke his ankle in 2020. Yeah. So it's like if Egbuka is the talent that we both think he is, earning a role from day one without having to deal with Andy Dalton, like obviously again, Lamb's a top 3 talent in the league. I'm not saying that Egbuka is going to be there right away, but I think very comfortably he has a wide receiver 1 level upside, like in terms of the long term.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's going to be a good situation to invest in for sure. The question is, again, let's say you're in one league. You're in one home dynasty league, one home redraft league. I think obviously one home dynasty league, you're taking Egbuka. That's a pretty straightforward one because he's the young one. One home redraft league, you get to select one of these guys. You spend a late 3rd round pick on Mike Evans. You spend a 5th, 6th rounder on Chris Godwin. You spend a 9th rounder or whatever on Emeka Egbuka. What are you thinking is the best course of action for someone in one redraft league?
Ding, ding, ding. It's like Emeka Egbuka in the 9th.
Yeah. Okay. Playing it through that, I think that's totally fair. My lean based on my exposure is taking Godwin in the 5th, 6th round. Because I do expect him to be healthy. But if you're, a little bit more injury averse, we get some bad news.
I like both.
I would say if we get any positive news about Chris, which I absolutely think we will, because as I've said on numerous occasions, the dude came back 8 months after a multi-ligament ACL tear and finished as a top 15 receiver in 2022 with a pretty washed Tom Brady that year. So I would say, and knowing that he was the wide receiver 2 in fantasy before he got hurt says a lot about his ceiling as well. The safe option is Evans because he's probably going to get the touchdowns. And if Godwin comes into the season banged up and all that stuff, but Egbuka is the Godwin hedge. And if you believe in Godwin, you should be taking him.
Yeah. And like I said, full transparency, I think you have to leave your drafts with one of Godwin or Egbuka because one of them is severely mispriced.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver core. Mainly, it's just a 2-man discussion. There is Hollywood Brown, who's going wide receiver 69 in Dynasty, wide receiver 61 in redraft, 184th and 132nd overall ADP. But the meat and potatoes of this is Rashee Rice versus Xavier Worthy. Rashee Rice, wide receiver 17, Worthy, wide receiver 21 in Dynasty. And then in redraft, it's a bigger discrepancy of wide receiver 12 for Rashee Rice, wide receiver 23 for Xavier Worthy.
Tell me how the fuck this makes sense, by the way. Rashee Rice, 25-year-old receiver, being drafted as the wide receiver 12 inside the top 24 in redraft, but he's going off the board as the wide receiver 17 in Dynasty. Like, tell me how that makes sense.
One of these ADPs is wrong. I think you and I are on opposite sides of the board here, where I think his redraft ADP is wrong.
I think his Dynasty ADP is
22 overall ADP is too high, whereas you think his Dynasty ADP should be higher.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, 25-year-old receiver that flashed top 5 level ceiling, not for 3 games, for 11 games prior to getting hurt. Because when you include the end of the 2023 when he got his full snaps, we saw a player that was, I mean, he was one of my favorite picks going into 2024 for how he finished 2023. So I do think that type of player is still there. He's been fully cleared. He's been practicing OTAs. He's literally been practicing without a brace on. Like, to me, any concerns of him, oh, is he hurt, have been kind of put aside. I mean, Mahomes has already said it. Rashee Rice posting on his Instagram, 2K season incoming. Like, he wouldn't be saying that if he didn't have full confidence on his knee, and he's not practicing with a brace. So that leans even more to the fact that he is healthy. So for me, like, I love Worthy as well. I think if he's going to be the Jameson Williams to Rashee Rice's Amon or St. Brown, that's kind of how I view this offense functioning. And realistically, if Patrick Mahomes does return to Patrick Mahomes level, there's space for both of these guys to completely crush.
Yeah, Rashee Rice is a very reliable speaker and thinker. So I think I'm going to take him at his word. That I honestly
take
like.
Mahomes
Maybe I think I'm going full unk here, but part of the Rashee Rice,
because he's a knucklehead,
is that I just think the guy's kind of a moron to some degree. Like, coming back from a devastating knee injury, again, it wasn't a full ACL tear and all that kind of stuff. And he is back on the field and he is practicing and he doesn't have a knee brace on and it looks like he's going to be fine. But that's not easy, man. That's hard work. That's like a lot of rehab. I'm a little worried about Rashee Rice, the person. Like, honestly, from a dynasty angle, I think that's why he might go a little bit lower, is because some people are worried he might get suspended. Some people he might like it. If it was any other player, no, it would not make sense that a young receiver who's going wide receiver 12 in redraft is going lower in dynasty. That would make zero sense. He should be going higher in dynasty because he's a young player who's going high in redraft. But I think baked into his dynasty angle is people like me who are like, guy's kind of a moron.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it, but also I don't understand it because, like you kind of alluded to, one of these ADPs is extremely wrong. And actually, you know what? I have him inside my top 24. I think back into the second, based off the upside he showed in the last 11 games prior to getting hurt. Like, I think the risk is there because if it wasn't there, he'd be a first round pick.
Yeah. Where do you have him in dynasty wide receiver rankings? Just out of curiosity, because
wide receiver 14. Wide receiver 14.
Okay, so you're back. You probably right below that McMillan Harrison area, right? Is where you have him.
So the difference for me, so I have him the tier, like I mentioned. So Puka, Brian Thomas Jr., Nico, Amon, Drake, obviously, like those guys are top 9. 10 to 13, I have it Hunter, McConkey, Harrison, McMillan, and then Rashee Rice would be right after them at 14.
Okay, so I have him in a tier with AJ, with JSN, with Garrett, with T. Higgins, except he's at the end of the tier. So I'm at 18 in Dynasty. And then in redraft, I think I'm relatively around the same range, like 18 to 20, I think is where I have him. I'd be okay spending a mid to late 3rd round pick on him in redraft. I'd be okay spending like an early 4th round pick in him in Dynasty drafts. It's just, for me, I get the hesitancy with the injury and with the suspension and all that kind of stuff. It's not going to happen probably this year based on everything that we've heard, but it still could happen in the future that he gets suspended. So I think that needs to maybe be baked into his dynasty price.
Yeah, and I think that is fair. Again, I have him wide receiver 12 in best ball, wide receiver 14 in dynasty. So I do actually have him higher in my best ball rankings, right where the market has versus in dynasty. Like I said, wide receiver 14, 2 spots lower. I will say though, I mean, realistically in best ball, I think the reason why I'm comfortable with this price is I wouldn't take him over the higher, or not higher upside, but high upside, higher floor players like, London, Ladd, AJ Brown. Like I would take those guys in best ball in redraft over him straight up. But once those guys are off the board, like to me, he's the clear next name.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely fair. Let's talk about his teammate because Zay had a great rookie season, especially down the end of it. Week 11 onward, I mean, you got 16.8 fantasy points, top 20 receiver, a couple of like 10-point games in a row, then 19.6, 20.5, 22.9 in week 17 when it mattered. Like the fantasy playoffs, 19.6, 20.5, and 22.9. He won people leagues last year. And in the actual playoffs, in the Super Bowl, he had 35.7 points. And then in the AFC Championship, he had 22.1 points. So is it the chicken or the egg? Did he produce because Rashee Rice was out of the lineup, or did he produce because he was 21 years old entering his rookie season and was raw coming into the NFL and kind of took that step forward? What do we believe about Xavier Worthy? Because I am of the opinion now, I guess I need to make this adjustment a little bit in my rankings, that if I'm not going to be super, super in on Rashee Rice, I probably should be higher on Xavier Worthy.
And you should. I mean, when you contextualize in his last 10 games of his rookie season, playoffs and regular season included, 76 targets, so 7.6 targets per game, 58 receptions, 5.8 receptions per game, 679 receiving yards, 67.9 per game, and 6 receiving touchdowns in that stretch. So when you compare that to the fact that he had negative PPR points on a Monday Night Football game against Tampa Bay earlier in the season, it's clear he took strides as a player. And like you said, he was raw. It makes sense why he struggled early, but once it kind of clicked for him in those last 10 games, we did see the production and just the play in general rise a ton. Like I said, to me, I view it as you're betting on Rashee Rice to be the Amon-Ra of this offense. You're betting on Xavier Worthy to potentially be a Jameson Williams plus. The difference is that instead of Jared Goff, you have the best quarterback on earth if he gets back to that 40-plus passing touchdown level, inherently offering higher upside.
Yeah, and I think the whole like NFL scheme of it all, which is that like the Chiefs don't have these big play, bomb touchdowns really anymore. They've been running a very take what the defense gives you type of offense, and that would obviously favor Rashee Rice over Xavier Worthy. But Xavier Worthy was used in that realm as well. He had a 64th percentile win rate as a rookie against zone coverage. And I don't know what games exactly Matt Harmon sampled, but I would imagine if you only had sampled like week 11 onward, it was probably better numbers than it was week 1 to 10 for Xavier Worthy, because he was not good at the beginning of the season and it took him a while to get his legs under him. So again, I just moved Xavier Worthy up a little bit in Dynasty because I probably should be higher on him if I'm lower on Rice to some degree. And I probably should move him up in best ball as well. I would say the one thing I have to say about this offense in general is it wouldn't shock me if this is kind of similar to the Bills in a way where it is spread the ball out a little bit, because I think Hollywood's a good receiver. I think he can be a very decent dart throw startup pick, decent best ball. You know, he's 132 overall ADP in a wide receiver thirsty market. He'll probably go on draft in a lot of people's home redraft leagues.
At the end of the day, if we're drafting I don't want to say a statue quarterback, but let's just say Patrick Mahomes ain't an economic quarterback at this point in his career. We're drafting him as the wide receiver 6. We need to be in on this passing attack if we're that confident taking a pocket passer as the quarterback 6 off the board.
Yeah, who's going to be 30 this year as well.
Yeah,
from a dynasty lens. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting receiving core, man. It's going to shake out weird. I still think Kelsey will be heavily involved, and I actually would say that he'll probably be like first or second on the team in total targets, Travis Kelsey. Maybe he's third. It's possible. But he just has like a chain movie kind of role where he could just get his PPR targets and be on his merry way. So going to be a weird situation, man, because once you throw Kelsey into the mix and Hollywood into the mix and any other receivers that they have into the mix, it wouldn't shock me if it is like Mahomes just finds whoever's open.
I will say, though, it does suck that Travis Kelsey has turned into Zach Ertz within a calendar year. But hey, he's in a happy relationship, so kudos. He's got other priorities.
Yeah, and he's got a weird haircut now. So he went from, I saw somebody tweet out that he went from attending the barbecue and working the grill to calling the bylaws on the barbecue because it's too loud, based on his haircut before and his haircut now, which I thought was hilarious.
Man, I mean, you're dating a global superstar. It makes sense how you have to kind of look. I mean, let's just say you can't be chugging beers in front of Taylor Swift, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, your brother can do that though. Green Bay Packers is the other receiver core. I would say it's probably less ambiguous this year than it even was last year, because last year it was like really anybody's game. like we were big Wicks guys. Dubs was just the steady Eddie at that point. Jaden Reed obviously was drafted the highest of last year. Christian Watson had truthers. I know Ryan Heath, who's been on the channel, loved Christian Watson last year. Yep. Green Bay is weird because obviously they made a very significant investment in this position, which was taking Matthew Golden in the first round. From a dynasty angle, he's going the highest, wide receiver 32 off the board, 84th overall ADP. Jaden Reed, it's the same order on a redraft and dynasty. It's Golden, Reed, Dubs, Wicks in the same order. It's just the gap, I would say, between Dubs and Reed in redraft is smaller than the gap between Dubs and Reed in dynasty. And then the gap between Golden and Reed in redraft is one pick, literally. Like it's literally, they're going exactly in the same spot, 42 and 43 respectively, Golden one spot higher, and then 77th and 78th overall ADP. I like playing this through Reed personally.
Yeah. In both formats, realistically, I love all 4 of these costs. I know that's the passive take. Like, I mean, like you got to take a stance one way or another. It's like, I just think Jordan Love's mispriced. And I think this Packers offense as a whole, passing offense as a whole, is mispriced. They were only, the second lowest in terms of passing volume last year because Jordan Love was hurt. Jordan Love looked like he tore his ACL in week 1 against the Eagles, and their volume never rose after that. So to me, it's like if you're getting a fully healthy Jordan Love, who literally 2 years ago finished the last 8 games with like a 16-1 touchdown interception ratio, upset the Cowboys in the playoffs, 31 touchdowns, I think, to 10 interceptions across the year. Like he had an objectively fantastic year. And obviously last year he had some of his hardships, but I thought a lot of that predominantly came off the fact because he was recovering from that MCL sprain. If he is fully healthy, which by all accounts it sounds like he is, I think they want to return to the level, because if you remember in that week 1 game, when Love was healthy, when Reed was flying, like,
bombs away, man, and Jaden Reed had a game.
It's fucking fireworks. So to me, the way I look at it is Golden, 3-level threat. I think he's got the highest upside to eventually end up being the number 1. I understand why he's the wide receiver 32 highest in terms of dynasty ADP, because I do think he has the upside to play both inside and out, whereas Reed may be only a slot-only player at this point. And Matthew Golden, again, 22nd overall draft capital. I think you kind of have that as a hedge in terms of the investment. Jaden Reed, the separation he showed last year, Obviously, the dynamism he brings, yards after catch ability. I want my shares of him in an offense I think is going to be good. But I also think Dubs and Wicks, like Dubs, you're getting, round 15 in best ball drafts. You're just praying on spike weeks at that point, praying that he's probably the most developed on this team at this point to play that outside wide receiver role. And if you want to get really cute, like, hey, this guy might have to learn how to catch a football. But if you want to mix in an 18th round Dontavian Wicks, I do think he's flashed upside before too.
Yeah, I think best ball wise, I like them all. Like, for sure, I would say absolutely best ball wise, I like them all. I do think I lean Reed in Dynasty. And it's not because I don't like Golden in Dynasty, because I think his price tag is probably fine. Like, I have him ranked wide receiver 29. He goes wide receiver 32. So I'm actually technically higher on market than Matthew Golden is on the in the Dynasty startup ADP. But I have Jaden Reed at wide receiver 39, and he goes wide receiver 43 and in Dynasty. And I like him quite a bit, just because I really do think that if we simulated the season, yes, at cost. Okay. I like him. Not over Golden straight up.
Okay, just have to make sure.
Because we're in a startup right now where Jaden Reed is starting to creep into like where you would about take him. And Golden went like 2.5 rounds earlier. And I'm like, I think the guys going around Golden may be a little bit better than the guys going around Reed, which is why I feel a little bit better about Reed. We were also, if you simulated the season last year a couple times and Jordan Love doesn't get hurt, we might have seen like a top 20 season out of Jaden Reed, legitimately.
People were literally having the conversation, is Jaden Reed a top 12 to 15 dynasty receiver after the first month of the season? Yeah. Like, that was conversations that we were having. And I think at one point I literally put him in my top 15 because I'm like, okay, what's not to like? Potential wide receiver 1, Jordan Love. Now, obviously, do I have a little bit more pause now just saying, okay, he's going to be a wide receiver? Like, I think more often than not, in most scenarios, he's going to be more so a Deebo Samuel style hit than a Brandon Aiyuk style hit.
Which is great for best ball, I might add, because he's been a big spike week guy.
Yeah. But regardless, I mean, if I think Jordan Love can have a top 5 in voting level MVP, potentially even win the MVP level season this year, I mean, he was one of the hottest bets to win the MVP last year prior to the knee injury.
Yeah, no, he was. Yeah, this is a weird receiver core for sure. I think what ends up playing itself out, and you made he's the JMO, he's the St. Brown situation. You could kind of argue that that's going on in Green Bay as well, where it's a very Walmart Shein version of it, where you got Jaden Reed is the discount.
Tucker Kraft and Sam Laporta.
Yeah, he's exactly. Yeah, he's the discount Debo or whatever, and Golden's kind of the discount Aiyuk or the discount Jameson Williams or whatever in that situation. So yeah, I like both of these guys. I would say, again, I'm going to ask you the question because we're kind of waffly on this receiver core in general. You're in one redraft league. You're in one dynasty league. Who are you taking? At their cost, keep that in mind, opportunity cost.
I think, so in terms of dynasty opportunity cost, I mean, regardless, I just go with the first round investment of Golden Dynasty, just because realistically for me, I would rather the testament to that first round label. He was a receiver that I still believed in. He was a top 5 wide receiver for me in the class. And I do think he schematically fits perfectly with what Green Bay and Jordan Love want to do. He, to me, has the most upside to be a true 3-level threat. However, I do like Jaden Reed as well. Like, I think either of those guys, if you prefer Jaden Reed, I don't think it's a crazy take, although I think Golden you have to lean for. Yeah. However, in redraft, it's a lot more unclear. And I'm going to check my best ball.
You don't get the hindsight of saying, because I like Jaden Reed in Dynasty because he's 2.5 rounds cheaper. But I don't get the hindsight of saying, I like Jaden Reed in redraft because he's 2.5 rounds cheaper. No, they're the same pick. I have to make a decision, and I like Jaden Reed in both formats personally because Golden's a rookie. That's the other thing, is that Golden didn't have a whole lot of production in college. Took a while to get acclimated to Texas's offense last year. It wouldn't shock me if Golden also isn't super, super productive until like week 9 and on his rookie year, whereas Jaden Reed may be stacking up monster PPR performances before that.
In full transparency, so to answer the question in redraft, I literally had to look at my rankings to see who I had higher. I have Jaden Reed as my wide receiver 39. I have Matthew Golden as my wide receiver 42. So I like both these guys a lot because I think Love can just carry both their productions. But I also think both of them have legitimate spike week potential. But like you said, if I'm on the clock and I'm in, what would that be, the 7th or 8th round of my redraft league, and I can only pick one, it would actually be Jaden Reed in redraft.
Yeah, no, I have Reed a couple spots higher actually than I have Golden. I have a tier discrepancy between the two of them. I have Jaden Reed at 38th overall, 39th overall, and then I have Matthew Golden at 43, but there's a tier break after my 40th. So yeah, I feel pretty good about Jaden in redraft this year. So this was an interesting video. talking through some scenarios, talking through some receiver cores. Even, we just talked about offenses in general. I mean, we talked about Dalton Kincaid in the video and Caleb Williams and guys that aren't even receivers on each of these teams. But it's fascinating to go through the ambiguity of stuff, because ambiguity really is what presents value a lot of the time. If you don't, we talked about it with the backfields too. It's like when you don't know for sure how something's going to shake out, it gives you opportunities to maybe hit on some stuff that people aren't thinking of.
Think of this one. What was the prime example last year? We talked about this actually in the backfield video, and funny enough, their backfield is also in the video. The decision point last year, if you took Ezekiel Elliott in your 12th round versus if you took Rico Dowdle in your 12th round, they were both in. You look at the process. Well, Ezekiel Elliott, he's been there before, touchdown equity. Offense is going to throw the football a ton anyways. You just want the guy that can potentially punch in touchdowns. The other factor for Rico Dowdle, obviously the argument that ended up winning was, well, he's a younger player. He was efficient last year. He has the upside to be better if he was given that 3-down type of workload. And obviously we ended up seeing that playing out in the back half of the year. But if you remember too, like the first 7 or 8 weeks of the season, the sentiment on the Cowboys backfield was we don't want either of them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it could. And some of these receiver cores, it might shake out that way, especially in managed redraft leagues. Like, are you going to feel great starting a 49ers receiver once Brandon Ayuk's back from injury? Like, you might be like, oh my God, I have no idea who to start every given week, which is why we play best ball. And if you guys want to draft some of these guys in best ball, head on over to Underdog Fantasy, which is linked down below in the pinned comment. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up, and you'll get up to $1,000 in bonus funds. And you will also get a free pick to use. You can save it for the NFL season. You can use it on like WNBA stuff, MLB stuff going on right now. And make sure to check that out if you guys are interested. Make sure to check out all of our rankings, redraft, dynasty, trade value charts, my teams tool, everything over on flockfantasy.com. And again, use the promo code FSE over there. Annual Mother Flockers who sign up right now can also get a free team review voucher. And again, I said this already, it makes sense to sign up right now because it would cover you through the redraft season. It would cover you through the in-season content, and it would cover you through next dynasty rookie season and through rookie drafts. It's probably the best time to sign up annually this time of year. Plus it's June, not a whole lot going on. We get to your team reviews and we get them a good in-depth breakdown. And as your league mates are coming back, especially you guys in casual dynasty leagues and casual leagues, people don't really pay attention to fantasy football come July, come August. People start to come back and you can get some trades done and all that kind of stuff. So we can give you that advice if you check it out down below in the pinned comment. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.